Marcus Thompson's alarm clock hadn't worked in 3 months, but his body had learned to wake at 5:30 a.m. regardless. The cramped studio apartment in South Phoenix felt like an oven, even in the pre-dawn darkness. He rolled off the sagging mattress, his back protesting from another night on springs that had given up years ago. The air conditioning unit in the window wheezed and rattled, barely managing to move the stifling desert air. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. He stepped carefully around the bucket, positioned to catch drips from the leaking ceiling, a reminder of last month's monsoon that his landlord still hadn't bothered to fix. The linoleum floor was cracked and curling at the edges, and Marcus had learned exactly which spots would give way underfoot if he wasn't careful. This wasn't how he'd imagined his life would look at 20-8. The bathroom mirror reflected a man who looked older than his years. Dark circles shadowed his brown eyes, and his hands bore the permanent stains of motor oil and grease that no amount of scrubbing could completely remove. His father had those same hands once, back when Thompson's auto repair was a thriving business on the better side of town. Now those hands were still resting 6 feet underground, along with the dreams they'd built together. Marcus splashed cold water on his face, the only temperature the ancient pipes seemed capable of producing anymore. The shower had been broken for 2 weeks, and his requests to the landlord had been met with the same response as always: "I'll get to it when I get to it." He'd learned to make do with sink baths and the occasional shower at the community center downtown. His work clothes hung on a plastic chair beside the bed, the same worn jeans and faded work shirt he'd been rotating through for months. Fabric was thin in places, and the knees were permanently stained, but they were clean. Marcus had learned early that showing up to work looking defeated was a luxury he couldn't afford. People needed to believe in the man fixing their cars, even when that man was barely holding his own life together. The walk to Riverside Auto Repair took 45 minutes each way, a journey Marcus had made on foot for the past 8 months, since his truck finally gave up. The irony wasn't lost on him that a mechanic couldn't afford to fix his own vehicle. The transmission had gone out on the same day he'd received his father's medical bills. The choice between transportation and keeping a roof over his head hadn't been much of a choice at all. Phoenix at dawn was a different city than Phoenix at noon. The sidewalks were empty except for the occasional jogger or early shift worker, and the temperature was almost bearable. Marcus had learned to appreciate these quiet moments before the day's heat and chaos began. The mountains in the distance were painted purple and gold by the rising sun, and for just a few minutes, he could pretend he was walking towards something better, instead of just surviving another day. Riverside Auto Repair sat on a busy street corner, surrounded by a pawn shop, a check-cashing place, and a convenience store with bars on the windows. The neighborhood had seen better days, and so had the garage. The building's paint was peeling, and the asphalt in the parking lot was cracked and sprouting weeds. But the work was steady, and the owner, Carlos Rivera, was one of the few people who'd been willing to give Marcus a chance when his father's reputation wasn't enough to open doors anymore. Marcus arrived at exactly 7 a.m., as he had every day for the past 2 years. Carlos was already there, as he always was, sitting at his cluttered desk with a cup of coffee and a stack of work orders. The older man looked up as Marcus entered, his weathered face creasing into a familiar frown. "We need to talk," Carlos said, his voice carrying the weight of a conversation neither of them wanted to have. Marcus's stomach dropped. He'd seen that look before, heard that tone. It was the same voice Carlos had used when he'd had to let go of 2 other mechanics over the past year, same voice Marcus's father had used when he'd had to tell customers he couldn't fix their cars on credit anymore. "Business is slow," Carlos continued, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "It's real slow. I've been trying to make it work, but the numbers just don't add up anymore." Marcus stood in the doorway, his hand still on the door handle, as if keeping one foot in. The outside world might somehow change what was coming. He'd known this day might arrive, but knowing and experiencing were 2 different things entirely. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I really am. You're a good mechanic, maybe the best I've ever had, but I can't afford to keep 3 guys on the payroll anymore." Rodriguez has been here longer, and Tommy's got 4 kids at home. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady if he tried to speak. Carlos reached into his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope, thin and light in his hands. 2 weeks' pay, Carlos said, extending the envelope. I wish it could be more, but it's all I can manage right now. Things turn around, you'll be the first person I call. Marcus took the envelope, feeling the weight of his future in his hands. 2 weeks' pay would barely cover his rent, let alone food, utilities, and the growing stack of his father's medical bills that followed him like shadows. He'd been making minimum payments when he could afford to make any payments at all. And the collection calls had become a daily soundtrack, too. His life. I understand, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thanks for everything, Carlos. You've been good to me. Carlos stood up, his own eyes slightly watery. You're going to land on your feet, kid? Your father would be proud of the man you've become. Marcus nodded again, not trusting himself to respond to the mention of his father. He turned and walked back out into the morning sun, the envelope in his pocket feeling heavier with each step. The 45-minute walk home stretched ahead of him, but for the first time in months, wasn't in a hurry to get anywhere. The streets were busier now, filled with people heading to jobs they still had, driving cars they could still afford to maintain. Marcus found himself studying each face, wondering how many of them had ever stared at a pile of bills they couldn't pay, or calculated whether they could afford both groceries and electricity in the same month. By the time he reached his apartment, building the morning coolness had burned away, replaced by the relentless Arizona heat that would only get worse as the day wore on. The building superintendent, Mrs. Chen, was watering the dying plants in the small courtyard. She looked up as Marcus approached, her expression shifting from pleasant to concerned as she noticed he was home far too early. Everything okay, Marcus? She asked, her accent thick but her concern genuine. Lost my job, he said simply. It was no point in sugarcoating it or pretending otherwise. Mrs. Chen had been the only person in the building who'd ever shown him any kindness, occasionally bringing him leftovers from her family's dinner, or pretending not to notice when his rent was a few days late. Her face fell. Oh, Marcus, I'm so sorry. These are hard times for everyone. Yes, ma'am, they are. She set down her watering can and studied him with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen her share of life's difficulties. My nephew owns a small garage. Over on Indian School Road, it's not much, but maybe he needs help. I could make a phone call. Marcus felt a small flicker of hope, the first he'd experienced in hours. I'd be grateful for that, Mrs. Chen. Really grateful. I'll call him this afternoon. You're a good boy, Marcus. Good things have to come to people like you eventually. Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment, Mrs. Chen's words echoing in his mind. He wanted to believe her, but belief had become a luxury he couldn't afford. Good things happened to people who had the resources to create opportunities, not to people who counted quarters to buy ramen noodles. Inside his apartment, Marcus sat on his bed and opened the envelope Carlos had given him. Money was exactly what he'd expected, enough to buy him a little time, but not enough to solve any real problems. He pulled out a notebook he kept hidden under his mattress. It's filled with careful calculations and crossed-out budgets. Rent was due in a week. The electric bill was already past due, and the water bill would follow soon after. His father's medical bills totaled more than he made in 6 months. And the collection agencies had started calling the neighbors when they couldn't reach him directly. The numbers on the page told a story of a man drowning in slow motion, and Marcus had run out of ways to rewrite the ending. He'd thought about leaving Phoenix, starting over somewhere new where his father's debts and his own failures couldn't follow him. But starting over required money he didn't have, and the few possessions he owned weren't worth enough to finance a new beginning. Besides, this was home, even if home had become a place that no longer wanted him. The heat in the apartment was becoming unbearable. Marcus opened the single window, though the air outside was no cooler than the air inside. The sounds of the city filtered up from below. Car engines, distant music, children playing in the courtyard. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that just a few floors above them, a man was trying to figure out how to survive another month. Marcus lay back on his bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had grown larger since the last rain. He closed his eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to have hope, to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. His father had been an optimist, always believing that hard work and honest dealing would eventually pay off. Marcus had inherited his father's work ethic, but not his faith in the universe's fairness. The phone rang. A harsh sound that made Marcus's heart race. It was probably another collection call, another reminder of money he didn't have and debts he couldn't pay. He let it ring, knowing that ignoring it would only delay the inevitable, but unable to face another conversation about payment plans and final notices. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself thinking about Mrs. Chen's nephew and the possibility of work. It was a thin thread of hope, but it was something. He'd learned to be grateful for small possibilities, even when they were likely to lead nowhere. In his current situation, nowhere was still a destination. And any movement felt better than standing still. The sun was beginning to set. When Marcus finally forced himself to get up and face the rest of his day, I had applications to fill out, phone calls to make, and a future to salvage from the wreckage of his present. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new disappointments, and new opportunities to prove that he was stronger than his circumstances. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But first, he had to survive tonight, in Phoenix, in a studio apartment with broken air conditioning and a leaking ceiling. That was challenging enough. 3 days had passed since Marcus lost his job. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him like the oppressive Arizona heat. Mrs. Chen's nephew hadn't called back. The handful of applications he'd submitted to other garages had been met with polite rejections or complete silence. The money from Carlos was already half gone, spent on keeping the lights on and putting food in his stomach. Marcus had decided to walk to the library downtown, where he could use the computers to search for more job opportunities and escape the stifling heat of his apartment for a few hours. The air conditioning was free. Sometimes they had diode pastries from a local bakery that volunteers would set out for anyone who needed them. Pride had become a luxury he couldn't afford. The walk took him through neighborhoods that transitioned, from rundown to upscale as he moved toward the city center. The contrast was stark and immediate. Cracked sidewalks gave way to tree-lined streets, and chain-link fences were replaced by adobe walls surrounding pristine desert landscaping. Marcus had always been aware of Phoenix's economic divide, but walking through it on foot made the disparities impossible to ignore. He was passing through one of the wealthier neighborhoods when he heard it, the sound of someone crying. Angry tears of a child's tantrum, or the brief emotion of a minor frustration. But the deep, soul-wrenching sobs of someone whose world had collapsed. The sound was coming from a small park tucked between two massive houses. A perfectly manicured space with a fountain, benches, and shade trees that probably cost more to maintain than Marcus paid in rent. Marcus paused, his instincts warring with his common sense. His father had raised him to help people when they were hurting, but his current circumstances had taught him that getting involved in other people's problems was a risk he couldn't afford. Still, the crying continued, and something in the sound made his chest tighten with recognition. He knew that kind of pain. He approached the park slowly, scanning the area for the source of the distress. On a bench beneath a large mesquite tree sat a woman, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with each sob. She was dressed in clothes that Marcus immediately recognized as expensive, even though his knowledge of fashion came mostly from glimpses in store windows he couldn't afford to enter. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that suggested professional care, and her jewelry caught the morning light in ways that spoke of quality and cost. Marcus stood at the edge of the park, uncertain. This woman clearly existed in a world far removed from his own, and he had no idea what kind of problems someone like her might face. But the crying hadn't stopped, and despite their obvious differences, her pain sounded remarkably similar to his own. He cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me, ma'am? Are you all right?" The woman looked up, startled, and Marcus got his first clear. Look at her face. She was probably in her early 30s, with striking features that would have been beautiful if they weren't currently swollen and red from crying. Her eyes were a deep green, and they held a combination of embarrassment and wariness as she studied him. "I'm fine," she said quickly, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "Just having a difficult morning." Marcus nodded, recognizing the lie for what it was. He'd told the same lie countless times over the past few years, always to people who asked, but rarely to people who actually wanted to hear the truth. "I understand. I was just walking by and heard. Oh, I wanted to make sure you weren't hurt or anything." The woman studied him more carefully, taking in his worn clothes, his calloused hands, and the genuine concern in his expression. "Don't know who I am, do you?" Question caught Marcus off guard. "Should I?" It for the first time since he'd approached. The woman's expression shifted slightly towards something that might have been relief. "No, I suppose not. I'm sorry, I'm not usually so emotional in public." Marcus gestured toward the bench. "Mind if I sit? I've been walking for a while, and these shoes weren't made for long distances." The woman hesitated, then nodded. Marcus settled onto the opposite end of the bench, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Up close, he could see that her clothes were indeed expensive, but they were also wrinkled and slightly disheveled, as if she'd been wearing them for longer than intended. "I'm Marcus," he said simply. "Diana," she replied, her voice still thick with emotion. "Diana Blackwood." The name meant nothing to Marcus, but the way she said it suggested it should. He filed that information away and focused on the more immediate concern. "Is there someone I can call for you? A friend or family member?" Diana let out a bitter laugh. "That's actually part of the problem. The people I thought were friends. Let's just say I've learned who my real friends are recently. Family." She trailed off, her expression darkening. Marcus recognized the tone. He'd heard it in his own voice when people asked about his support system. When they assumed he had people to lean on during difficult times. "I'm sorry. That's tough. You don't even know what happened," Diana said, looking at him with curiosity. "Doesn't matter," Marcus replied. "Pain is pain. I may not know your specific situation, but I know what it feels like when the people you count on let you down." Diana studied his face, searching for signs of insincerity or hidden motives. Finding none, she seemed to relax slightly. "It's been a really bad week, actually a really bad month. My whole life has basically fallen apart, and I'm sitting in a park crying like a child because I don't know what else to do." Marcus nodded. "I lost my job 3 days ago. Been living paycheck to paycheck for months, and now I don't even have that. My apartment's falling apart. I owe more money than I can count. And I'm walking to the library because I can't afford gas for a car I don't have." He paused, surprised by his own honesty. "So yeah, I get it." Diana turned to look at him. Directly, her green eyes wide with surprise. "You're telling me this because sometimes it helps to know you're not the only one whose life isn't working out the way you planned," Marcus said. "And because you look like you could use someone to talk to who won't judge you for being human." For several minutes, they sat in comfortable silence. The park was quiet, except for the sound of the fountain and the distant hum of traffic. Marcus found himself studying the neighborhood around them, marveling at the contrast between the manicured perfection of the landscaping and the raw emotion of the moment they were sharing. "I had company," Diana said suddenly. "Built it from nothing, grew it into something I was proud of. I thought I had good people working for me, people I could trust. Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things." Marcus waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. My business partner, someone I considered a close friend, had been stealing from the company for months. When I found out and confronted him, he turned it around and made it look like I was the one who was embezzling. The board believed him. The investors believed him. Now I'm facing lawsuits and criminal charges for something I didn't do. The words tumbled out of Diana as if she'd been holding them in for too long. Marcus listened without interrupting, recognizing the need to be heard without judgment. "I lost everything," she continued. "My company, my reputation, my home. The legal fees have drained my savings, and the few people I thought were friends have either distanced themselves or openly turned against me. I'm staying in a hotel room, living off what little I have left, and I don't know how to prove my innocence when everyone has already decided I'm guilty." Marcus absorbed the story, struck by the parallels to his own situation, despite their vastly different circumstances. That's terrible. I'm really sorry you're going through that. Diana wiped her eyes again, seeming embarrassed by her outburst. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. You don't even know me? Sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger, Marcus said. No history, no expectations, no agenda. This is someone willing to listen. What about you? Diana asked. You mentioned losing your job. What happened? Marcus found himself sharing his story, talking about his father's death, the medical bills, the struggling garage, and the impossible math of trying to survive on minimum wage in a city that kept getting more expensive. He told her about the broken air conditioning, the leaking ceiling, and the collection calls that had become the soundtrack to his life. I keep thinking my dad would know what to do, Marcus said. He always seemed to have a plan, even when things were bad. But I feel like I'm just treading water, and every day I get a little more tired. Diana listened with the same attention Marcus had given her, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Your father sounds like he was a good man, she said finally. He was. He taught me that you help people when they need it, even. If you don't have much to give, he used to say that kindness doesn't cost anything, but it's worth more than money. Diana smiled for the first time since Marcus had approached her. He sounds wise. He was. I just wish I had inherited some of his wisdom along with his work ethic. You helped me today, Diana said. A complete stranger who was having a breakdown. In a public park, you stopped, you listened, and you didn't judge. That sounds like wisdom to me. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the Arizona heat. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Diana said firmly. They wouldn't have. I've been sitting here for over an hour, and dozens of people have walked by. You're the first person who stopped. They sat together for another few minutes, watching the fountain and enjoying the shade. Marcus found himself wishing he could do something more to help Diana, but he was in no position to offer anything beyond a listening ear. I should probably get going, Marcus said eventually. I'm trying to get to the library before it gets too crowded. Diana nodded, seeming reluctant to end the conversation. Thank you, Marcus. Really, I needed this more than you know. Takes care of yourself, Diana. I hope things get better for you. Marcus stood and was about to leave when Diana spoke again. Wait, I know this might sound strange, but would you mind if I gave you my number? I don't have many people to talk to, right? Now, and you've been incredibly kind. Marcus hesitated, not because he didn't want to help, but because he wasn't sure what someone like Diana would want from someone like him. Still, he pulled out his phone, an ancient device with a cracked screen, and entered her number. I'm not sure how much help I can be, he said. But if you need someone to listen, I'm happy to do that. Diana smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, the expression reached her eyes. Sometimes that's exactly what people need. As Marcus walked away from the park, he found himself thinking about the encounter. In his current situation, he'd expected to spend the day focused on his own problems, but helping Diana had given him something he hadn't felt in months, a sense of purpose. His father had been right about kindness not costing anything, and Marcus felt richer for having spent a few minutes of his time trying to ease someone else's pain. He had no idea that the woman he'd just met was sitting on that bench, watching him walk away and making decisions that would change both of their lives forever. Diana Blackwood had built her first company from nothing, and she was about to do it again. This time, she wouldn't be doing it alone. 2 weeks had passed. Since Marcus met Diana in the park, and their brief encounter had evolved into something neither of them had expected. What started as a moment of kindness between strangers had grown into daily phone conversations that became the highlight of both their days. Marcus would call Diana from the library during his job search breaks, and she would call him from her hotel room when the walls felt like they were closing in. Diana had been careful not to reveal too much about her past wealth or the true scope of her former business empire. To Marcus, she was simply someone who had lost her company and was fighting to clear her name. Marcus, in turn, shared the daily struggles of unemployment with an honesty that surprised even him. Their friendship had become a lifeline for both of them. Proof that connection could exist across any divide. It was a Thursday morning when Marcus's phone rang while he was preparing another cup of instant coffee. His breakfast, and likely his lunch as well. The caller ID showed Diana's number, but when he answered, her voice sounded different. Shaky. Panicked. Marcus, I'm sorry to call so early, but I didn't know who else to call. Marcus immediately set down his coffee. All thoughts of his own problems pushed aside. What's wrong? Are you okay? I'm at the hospital. Emergency room at Phoenix General. I had what I think was a panic attack. I've never had one before and I thought I was having a heart attack. They're saying I'm fine physically, but they want to keep me for observation. Marcus was already reaching for his shoes. I'll be right there. You don't have to do that, Diana said. But her voice carried a desperate hope that suggested she very much wanted him to come. Yes, I do. Just tell me where you are in the hospital. The walk to Phoenix General took Marcus nearly an hour, but he made it in 45 minutes, his pace driven by concern for his friend. The emergency room was a chaos of activity, with ambulances arriving and departing, people in scrubs moving with purposeful urgency, and families huddled together in waiting areas that had seen too much worry. Marcus approached the reception desk. Suddenly aware of how out of place he looked in the sterile medical environment, his clothes were clean but obviously old, and his work boots squeaked slightly on the polished floor. I'm here to see Diana Blackwood, he told the receptionist. She called me from here. The woman behind the desk studied him with the practiced eye of someone who had seen every type of visitor imaginable. Are you family? I'm her. ... Marcus paused, realizing he didn't know how to categorize their relationship. I'm her friend. She asked me to come. The receptionist nodded and made a phone call. A few minutes later, a nurse appeared and led Marcus through a maze of corridors to a small room where Diana sat on an examination bed, looking smaller and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. You came, she said, and the relief in her voice was unmistakable. Of course I came, Marcus replied, taking the chair beside her bed. How are you feeling? Diana managed a weak smile, embarrassed mostly. Apparently panic attacks can feel exactly like heart attacks. I genuinely thought I was dying. What triggered it? Marcus asked gently. Diana's expression darkened. Got a call from my lawyer this morning. The criminal charges against me are moving forward. The district attorney is convinced they have a solid case, and my former business partner has provided them with what they think is compelling evidence of my guilt. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, not at Diana, but at the situation that had reduced this strong woman to a hospital bed. What does your lawyer think? He thinks I should consider a plea bargain, accept some guilt in exchange for a lighter sentence. Diana's voice cracked. He's basically telling me to admit to something I didn't do because it's the safest option. That's not justice, Marcus said firmly. No, it's not. But justice and the legal system don't always align. Diana wiped her eyes with a tissue. I've lost everything already. My reputation, my business, my savings. The only thing I had left was the truth, and now they want me to give that up too. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. He can't do that. If you're innocent, you can't let them force you to say otherwise. It's easy to say when you're not facing the possibility of years in prison, Diana replied, but there was no anger in her voice, only exhaustion. You're right, Marcus admitted. I can't imagine what you're going through. But I know you, Diana. Maybe not for very long. But I know the kind of person you are. You're not someone who steals or lies or hurts people for personal gain. Diana looked at him with surprise. How can you be so sure? You've known me for 2 weeks. Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. My father used to say that you can tell everything you need to know about a person by watching how they treat people who can't do anything for them. You could have ignored me that day in the park. You had your own problems, and I was just some stranger. But you talked to me, really listened, and you've been a friend to me when I needed one most. You listened to me first, Diana pointed out. 'Cause that's who you are, Marcus said. Someone worth listening to. Someone who deserves better than what's happening to you. Diana was crying again, but these tears were different from the ones she'd shed in the park. These carried relief and gratitude along with the pain. I don't have any family left, she said quietly. My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. I was an only child, and I never married or had children. I put everything into building my business, and when that was taken away, I realized I had nothing else. No one else. Marcus reached out and took her hand. You have me. I know that's not much, but you're not alone. Anna squeezed his hand, and they sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. The hospital bustled around them, but in that small room, they had created their own pocket of peace. Tell me about your father, Diana said eventually. Shh. You mention him often, and it's clear he was important to you. Marcus settled back in his chair, a small smile crossing his face. He was the best man I ever knew. He's honest, hardworking, generous to a fault. He built his auto repair business from nothing, and he was proud of providing good service at fair prices. He never got rich, but he helped a lot of people over the years. How did he die? Diana asked gently. Cancer, Marcus said simply. Cancer, even though he never smoked a day in his life. Just one of those random, unfair things that happen. He fought it for 2 years, and I used up all my savings and tried to get him the best treatment we could afford. That's why you have so much debt, Diana realized. Marcus nodded. His medical bills, funeral expenses, and then trying to keep his business running while he was sick. I wasn't experienced enough to manage everything, and customers started going elsewhere. By the time he died, there wasn't much left to save. You tried to save his business along with his life, Diana said. That's incredible, Marcus. Felt like the right thing to do at the time. He'd worked his whole life to build something, and I couldn't just let it disappear without a fight. Diana studied his face, seeing the pain that still lived there. Do you regret it? The money you spent, the debt you took on? Marcus considered the question seriously. Sometimes I think about what my life would look like if I'd made different choices. But then I remember the extra time those treatments gave us, the conversations we had, the things he was able to teach me. You can't put a price on that. Your father raised someone special, Diana said softly. He tried his best. I just wish I could make him proud now. You're making him proud, Diana said with conviction. You're working hard. You're honest. You help people who need it. Those are the things that matter. A doctor appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Ms. Blackwood, we'd like to discharge you now. Your tests all came back normal, and your vitals have stabilized. We're going to give you some information about managing anxiety and stress. We'd recommend following up with your primary care. Physician Diana nodded and began gathering her things. As they prepared to leave, she turned to Marcus. Would you mind walking with me for a bit? I don't really want to go back to the hotel room yet. Of course, Marcus replied. They left the hospital together, stepping out into the midday heat. Phoenix in summer was unforgiving, but they found a small cafe with outdoor seating that provided shade and a gentle breeze from industrial fans. I have something to tell you, Diana said, once they were seated with cold drinks. I haven't been completely honest about my situation. Marcus felt a flicker of concern, but he kept his expression neutral. What do you mean? The company I lost, it wasn't just any company. It was worth over $50 million when I was forced out. I didn't just lose a job, Marcus. I lost an empire I spent 15 years building. Marcus absorbed this information slowly. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I wanted you to see me as a person, not as a former rich person who fell from grace. I wanted our friendship to be real, not based on what I used to have, or what I might be able to give you. Diana, Marcus said carefully. I don't care. If your company was worth $50 million or $50, you're still the same person who sat on that bench crying, the same person who talks to me every day and listens when I tell you about my problems. Money doesn't change who you are inside. Diana's eyes filled with tears again. Most people can't separate the two. When I had money, people wanted things from me. Now that I don't, most of those same people have disappeared, and they never really knew you, Marcus said simply. How do you do that? Dinah asked. Do what? Make everything seem so clear and simple when it feels impossibly complicated. Marcus shrugged. Maybe because my problems have always been simple. I need money to pay bills. I need a job to make money. I need skills and opportunity to get a job. When you don't have much, you learn to focus on what really matters. And what really matters? Anna asked. People, relationships, being able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you're trying to do the right thing. Everything else is just stuff. Diana leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus with new appreciation. You realize that most people would have reacted very differently to learning about my past wealth. How so? They would have started asking for things. Money, connections, opportunities. They would have seen dollar signs instead of a person. Marcus was genuinely puzzled by this. But you don't have any of those things to give right now. You're fighting the same kind of battles I am, just in a different arena. Exactly, Diana said. And that's why I know our friendship is real. They spent the rest of the afternoon talking, sharing stories and dreams and fears, with the kind of openness that usually takes years to develop. As evening approached, Diana seemed reluctant to return to her hotel room, and Marcus found himself wishing he had something better to offer than his cramped studio apartment. I should probably head back, Diana said finally, though her tone suggested she'd rather do anything else. You could come to my place, Marcus offered, then immediately felt embarrassed. I mean, it's not much. Actually, it's pretty terrible. But it's cooler than sitting outside, and you're welcome to stay for dinner if you don't mind spaghetti with jar sauce. Diana smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all day. I would love that, thank you. As they walked toward Marcus's neighborhood, Diana found herself thinking about the strange turn her life had taken. 3 weeks ago, she had been consumed with legal strategies and damage control. Today, she was looking forward to dinner in a studio apartment with a man who had never owned anything more valuable than a 20-year-old pickup truck for the first time in months. She felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The dinner at Marcus's apartment had been a revelation for both of them. Diana had never experienced such genuine contentment in such humble surroundings. While Marcus had discovered that sharing a simple meal could feel like the most natural thing in the world, when you were with the right person, they had talked until nearly midnight, and when Diana finally returned to her hotel, both of them knew their friendship had crossed into something deeper and more meaningful. The next morning brought unexpected news that would change everything. Marcus was at the community center, using their computers to continue his job search, when his phone rang. It was Diana, but her voice carried an excitement he hadn't heard since they'd met. Marcus, I need to see you. Can you meet me at the park where we first talked? I have something important to tell you. Is everything okay? Marcus asked, concerned by the intensity in her voice. Everything is more than okay. Please, just meet me there. I'll explain everything. Marcus made the familiar walk to the upscale neighborhood, his mind racing with possibilities. Diana's tone had been hopeful, almost jubilant, which was such a dramatic shift from the despair of the previous day that he wasn't sure what to expect. He found Diana sitting on the same bench where they'd first met, but this time she wasn't crying. Instead, she was practically vibrating with energy, her eyes bright and her posture alert. In her hands was a thick manila envelope and what appeared to be a tablet computer. You're not going to believe what happened, Diana said as soon as Marcus sat down. My lawyer called this morning. The charges against me have been dropped. Marcus felt relief flood through him. That's incredible. What changed? Diana's smile was brilliant. It turns out my former business partner got greedy. He thought he was untouchable after successfully framing me, so he tried the same scheme with his new company. But this time he wasn't careful enough. The FBI has been investigating him for 3 months, and they found evidence that not only proves he was stealing from our company, but also shows how he manufactured evidence against me. So you're completely cleared? Marcus asked, hardly daring to believe it. Completely. More than that, actually. The FBI's investigation has uncovered assets that my partner stole from our original company, assets that legally belong to me. Not just cleared, Marcus. I'm about to be significantly wealthy again. Marcus processed this information slowly. That's amazing, Diana. I'm so happy for you. Yeah. You deserve to have your name cleared. Diana studied his face carefully. Glad you don't seem surprised by the money part. Marcus shrugged. You told me yesterday that your company was worth $50 million. I figured that meant you understood money and business in ways I never will. I'm glad you're getting back what was stolen from you. Most people would be asking what this means for them, Diana observed. What do you mean? Diana leaned forward, her expression serious. Marcus, I'm about to have more money than most people see in several lifetimes. I'm going to have opportunities to invest, to build new companies, to make a real difference in the world. And the first thing I want to do is help you. Marcus felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Diana, I appreciate that, but I don't need charity. It's not charity, Diana said firmly. It's a partnership. Let me explain. She opened the tablet and showed Marcus a series of documents and plans. While I was stuck in that hotel room, fighting legal battles and trying to prove my innocence, I had a lot of time to think. I thought about what really matters, about what kind of business I wanted to build next, about what would give my life meaning. Marcus looked at the screen, seeing architectural drawings and business plans that were far beyond his understanding. Want to build something different this time? Diana continued. Not just a company that makes money, but one that solves real problems for real people. I kept thinking about you, about your father's garage, about the community that lost something important when honest. Skilled mechanics like your father couldn't compete with corporate chains. Marcus began to understand where this was heading, and his discomfort grew. Diana, ... double quotes, hear me out, she said. I want to create a network of community auto repair centers, places that provide honest service at fair prices, that train people. Invaluable skills that become anchors in neighborhoods that need economic stability. I want to do it right, with proper funding, fair wages, and a commitment to serving people instead of just extracting profit from them. Marcus stared at the plans on the screen. They were comprehensive, thoughtful, and clearly the product of serious research and consideration. This is what you've been working on? Every day since we met, Diana admitted. You talked about your father's values, about the kind of business he built, and I realized that's what I want to build too. But I can't do it alone. I need someone who understands cars, who understands that community, who shares those values. You want me to work for you? Marcus said slowly. I want you to build this with me, Diana corrected. Not as an employee, but as a true partner. Someone who helps shape what this becomes, who ensures it stays true to its mission. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the scope of what Diana was proposing. I don't know anything about running a business, especially not one this big. You know, the most important things, Diana said. You know how to treat people with respect, how to do honest work, how to put service before profit. Those are the hardest things to teach, and you already have them. Marcus stood up from the bench, needing to pace as he processed everything. Diana, this is incredible, and I'm honored that you'd even think of me. But I can't accept something like this. It's too much. Diana remained seated, watching him carefully. Why? Because I haven't earned it. Because I don't have the skills or experience to be your partner in something this big. Because it feels like charity, no matter what you call it. Marcus, look at me, Diana said firmly. When he turned toward her, she continued. 3 weeks ago, I was sitting on this bench, completely broken, convinced that my life was over. Could have walked by, like everyone else did. Instead, you stopped, you listened, and you treated me like a human being worth caring about. Marcus started to protest, but Diana held up her hand. I'm not done. Over the past 3 weeks, you've called me every day to check on me. You came to the hospital when I needed someone. You invited me into your home and shared your food with me when you barely have enough for yourself. You've been the best friend I've ever had, and you've never asked for anything in return. That's just being a decent person, Marcus said.
Ow.
It's not. It's being an exceptional person. Do you know how rare it is to find someone who gives without expecting anything back? Someone who sees value in people instead of just opportunities. Someone who can sit in a hospital room and make you feel like you're going to be okay just because they're there. Marcus sat back down on the bench, his head spinning. I've been wealthy before, Diana continued. I had employees, business partners, investors, advisors. I was surrounded by people who were supposed to be helping me build something great. But none of them ever made me feel the way you do when you listen to my problems or share your own struggles with honesty and trust. How do I make you feel? Marcus asked quietly. Like I matter as a person, not as a bank account. Like my ideas and dreams are worth considering, not just my money. Like I have value beyond what I can provide for other people. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, staring at the fountain in the center of the park. What would this partnership actually look like? Diana's expression brightened slightly. We start with one location. A full-service auto repair center that also offers training programs for people who want to learn the trade. Fair wages, transparent pricing, community involvement. We prove the concept works. Then we expand gradually. And my role would be, you'd oversee all the technical operations, hiring mechanics, setting service standards, developing training programs. You'd be the voice of the customer and the community, making sure we never lose sight of why we're doing this. Marcus considered this. What about the money side? The business planning, the legal stuff, the things I don't understand? That's my area, Diana said. I handle the financing, the regulatory compliance, the strategic planning. We each focus on what we do best, but we make all the important decisions together. And you really think this could work? Diana nodded emphatically. I think it could be incredible, but only if we do it together. I could start a chain of auto repair shops with the money I'm getting back, but that's not what I want. I want to build something that matters, something that makes communities stronger. I can't do that without someone who understands what that means. Marcus felt something stirring in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not just the desperate hope of someone trying to survive, but the ambitious hope of someone who might actually build something meaningful. What would happen to the debts I have now? He asked practically. Those would be resolved as part of your partnership agreement, Diana said simply. Clean slate, fresh start. Diana, that's tens of thousands of dollars. It's also a tiny fraction of what I'm about to recover. Marcus's money is just a tool. What matters is what you build with it. Marcus stared at the tablet screen again, this time really looking at the plans. He could see his father's values reflected in every aspect of Diana's vision, but amplified and supported in ways his father had never been able to achieve. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Anything? Why is this so important to you? You could invest your money in anything, build any kind of company. Why auto repair? Why community service? Why not something that would make you even wealthier? Diana was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Because the night after I met you, I lay awake in that hotel room thinking about what you'd said about your father, about building something you could be proud of, about serving people instead of just making money. And I realized that in all my years of business success, I'd never felt the kind of pride you felt when you talked about your father's work. She paused, looking out at the neighborhood around them. I made a lot of money with my first company, but I'm not sure I ever made anything I was truly proud of. This time, I want to build something that makes a real difference. Something that creates opportunities for people, that strengthens communities, that honors the kind of values your father believed in. Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes. Would have loved this idea. And let's build it for him, Diana said softly. Let's build it for every honest mechanic who struggled to compete with corporate chains. For every community that's lost something important when local businesses disappeared. For every person who deserves a fair chance to learn a valuable skill. Marcus looked at Diana, seeing not the wealthy businesswoman or the broken victim of fraud, but his friend who had become something much more important, a true partner who shared his deepest values. Okay, he said quietly. Let's do it. Smile was radiant. Really? Really? But I have one condition. Name it. We start small, we do it right, and we never forget why we're doing this. Diana reached out and took his hand. Deal? Partners? Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling the weight and possibility of the moment. Partners. As they sat together in the park where they'd first met, both of them knew they were about to embark on something that would change not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. The broken mechanic and the heartbroken billionaire had found something in each other that neither had known they were looking for. A shared vision of what business could be when it was built on values instead of just profit. The real work was about to begin. The first sign that everything was about to change came in the form of a black luxury sedan, pulling up outside Marcus's rundown apartment building. Marcus had never seen a car like it in his neighborhood before, and he certainly hadn't expected it to be there for him. When the driver rolled down the window and called his name, Marcus felt like he was living in someone else's life. "Mr. Thompson, Ms. Blackwood is waiting for you." Marcus climbed into the back seat, the leather interior a stark contrast to the cracked vinyl of every vehicle he'd ever owned. Diana was waiting with a briefcase full of documents, her professional demeanor. Fascinating contrast to the vulnerable woman he'd comforted just days earlier. "Ready for your first day as a business owner?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I don't think I'll ever be ready for this," Marcus admitted, looking out the window as his neighborhood disappeared behind them. 3 days ago was counting quarters 2 by ramen noodles. "Now I'm supposedly about to own a business," Diana corrected. "And we're going to start by finding the perfect location. I've identified 3 possible sites, and I want your input on all of them." The first location was a former auto repair shop in a middle-class neighborhood that had been closed for 6 months. The building was solid but dated, with 4 service bays and a small office area. As they walked through the space, Marcus could envision the possibilities, but he could also see the work that would be required. "The bones are good," he told Diana, running his hand along a workbench that had clearly seen decades of use. "The equipment is old, but serviceable. The location has good visibility from the street, and there's plenty of parking." Diana took notes as he spoke, asking technical questions that showed she'd done her homework about the auto repair business. What would it take to make this place operational? Marcus considered the question carefully. New diagnostic equipment, updated tools, fresh paint, better lighting. Maybe 60,000 in improvements to make it competitive with modern shops, and to make it exceptional, another 40,000. Top-of-the-line equipment, customer lounge, training classroom for apprentices, environmental improvements to make it cleaner and more efficient. Diana nodded. "Let's see the other locations before we decide." The second location was larger and more modern, but it was in a shopping center dominated by chain stores and national franchises. As they toured the space, Marcus felt increasingly uncomfortable. "It's impressive," he said diplomatically, "but it doesn't feel right. This is the kind of place where people expect to be overcharged and treated like numbers. I'm not sure we could build the community relationships we want here." "Agree," Diana said. "What about it specifically bothers you?" Marcus thought about how to articulate his concerns. "My father always said that trust was the most important thing in this business. People need to feel comfortable bringing their cars to you, confident that you'll treat them fairly. This place feels too corporate, too disconnected from the community." Third location surprised both of them. It was an old gas station in a transitional neighborhood, the kind of area where young families were moving in alongside longtime residents. The building needed significant work, but it had character and history. "This is it," Marcus said, within minutes of walking through the door. "This is where we should be." Diana looked around the space, trying to see what Marcus saw. "It needs a lot of work, yes, but look at the neighborhood. Young families who need reliable, affordable car service. Older residents on fixed incomes who've been taken advantage of by chain shops, small businesses that could use fleet maintenance. This is where we can make a real difference." As Marcus explained his vision for the space, Diana saw the transformation. Through his eyes, the old service bays could be modernized while maintaining their character. The former convenience store area could become a comfortable waiting room and community space. There was even room for a small classroom where they could offer automotive training programs. "The demographics are perfect," Diana added, consulting her tablet. "Median income is right in our target range, and there's no independent shop within a 3-mile radius." They spent the afternoon with contractors and equipment suppliers, getting estimates and timelines. Diana's business experience showed as she negotiated terms and structured deals, while Marcus provided the technical expertise to ensure they were making sound decisions. By evening, we're sitting in Diana's hotel suite, surrounded by contracts, architectural plans, and equipment catalogs. Marcus still felt overwhelmed by the speed of everything, but he was beginning to believe it might actually work. "There's something else we need to discuss," Diana said, pulling out a legal document. "Your partnership agreement." Marcus looked at the thick contract with apprehension. Should probably have a lawyer review this. Should, Diana agreed. But I want to explain the key points so you understand what you're agreeing to. She walked him through the partnership structure. They would own the business equally, with Diana providing the initial capital and Marcus contributing his expertise and labor. Profits would be split evenly after both partners drew reasonable salaries. Most importantly, neither partner could make major decisions without the other's agreement. Why equal ownership? Marcus asked. You providing all the money? Because money is just the entry fee, Diana replied. You're providing the knowledge, the relationships, and the values that will make this business successful. Without you, I'd just be another wealthy investor trying to extract profit from a community I don't understand. Marcus read through the contract carefully, asking questions about terms he didn't understand. Diana answered everything patiently, encouraging him to take as much time as he needed. There's one more thing, Diana said when they'd finished reviewing. The partnership agreement. Your personal debts. She handed him another document. This is a personal loan agreement between us. 0 interest, payable over 10 years from your share of the business profits. It covers all your outstanding debts, including your father's medical bills. Marcus stared at the figure on the page. It was more money than he'd made in the past. 3 years combined. Diana, this is too much. It's an investment in my business partner, she said firmly. I need you focused on building our company, not worried about collection calls and past due notices. Consider it a signing bonus. That night, Marcus lay on his sagging mattress, staring at the water stain on his ceiling and trying to process everything that had happened. In less than a week, he'd gone from unemployment and desperation to business ownership and financial security. It felt surreal, like a dream he might wake up from at any moment. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Having second thoughts? It's not too late to change your mind. Marcus smiled and typed back, no second thoughts, trying to figure out how to be worthy of this opportunity. Her response came immediately. You already are. Get some sleep, partner. Tomorrow we start building something amazing. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Diana had arranged for Marcus to meet with an attorney who specialized in small business partnerships, while she handled the financial arrangements with banks and investors. They reconvened at lunch to sign the final agreements. Any last questions? The attorney asked, as Marcus prepared to sign his name. Marcus looked at Diana, who was watching him with patient understanding. Just one. Are you sure about this? Really sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Diana replied. We're going to build something incredible together. Marcus signed his name with hands that barely trembled. In that moment, he felt his father's presence, as if the older man was standing beside him, proud of the choice his son was making. The construction began the following week. Marcus found himself on site every day, working alongside contractors and learning aspects of business development he'd never imagined. Diana was there too, asking questions, making decisions, and demonstrating a hands-on approach that surprised. Many of the workers, most investors, never set foot in places like this. One contractor told Marcus during a coffee break. Your partner's different. Yes, she is, Marcus agreed, watching Diana discuss environmental compliance with an EPA representative. She's pretty remarkable. The neighborhood began to take notice as the old gas station transformed into something new and promising. Residents stopped by to ask questions and express cautious optimism. Several mentioned their frustration with the corporate chain shops across town where they felt overcharged and undertreated. We really need a place like this, one elderly woman told Marcus as she watched him help install new equipment. Somewhere honest folks can get their cars fixed without being taken advantage of. That's exactly what we're building, Marcus assured. Her honest service at fair prices. 3 weeks into construction, Marcus received a call that would test his newfound partnership. Carlos Rivera, his former boss, wanted to meet. They sat in the same cluttered office where Marcus had lost his job, but the dynamic between them had changed completely. Carlos looked tired and stressed, while Marcus radiated the confidence of someone who'd found his purpose. I heard about your new shop, Carlos said. People are talking about it all over the neighborhood. Word travels fast, Marcus replied. I also heard who your partner is. Diana Blackwood. I looked her up after I heard the name. She's worth millions. Marcus nodded. She's a good businesswoman. Carlos leaned forward. Marcus, I want to be honest with you. Business has gotten worse since you left. Way worse. I'm probably going to have to close down within the next few months. I'm sorry to hear that, Carlos. You gave me a chance when I needed one, which is why I'm hoping you might return the favor. I know you're starting fresh with big money backing you, but I was wondering if there might be a place for me in what you're building. Marcus studied his former boss's face, seeing the same desperation he'd felt just a month earlier. What did you have in mind? I've got 30 years of experience, solid relationships with parts suppliers, knowledge of the local market. I could be your shop manager, help you avoid the mistakes I made. It was a generous offer, and Marcus recognized the swallowing of pride it represented. I'll need to discuss it with my partner, but I think there might be a place for you. We're going to need experienced people who understand the community. Carlos's relief was visible. Thank you, Marcus. I know I'm asking a lot. You're asking for a chance, Marcus replied. Same thing you gave me. That evening, Marcus discussed Carlos's request with Diana. She listened thoughtfully as he explained their history and Carlos's qualifications. What's your instinct? She asked. He's a good mechanic and a decent man who made some business mistakes. He taught me a lot about customer service and managing workflow. I think he could be valuable. Then let's bring him on board, Diana said. Everyone deserves a second chance. As the grand opening approached, Marcus found himself working 18-hour days. But they were the most fulfilling hours he'd ever spent. He was building something that mattered, creating opportunities for others, and honoring his father's memory in ways he'd never imagined possible. Diana was there every step of the way, learning the business from the ground up and demonstrating the same work ethic that had made her successful before. Watching her interact with customers and employees, Marcus saw not the wealthy investor he'd expected, but a true partner who shared his vision completely. Are you ready for this? Diana asked on the night before their grand opening, as they stood in their completed shop, gleaming and ready for business. Marcus looked around at everything they'd built together in just 6 weeks. I think so. Are you? Diana smiled. Never been more ready for anything in my life. Tomorrow, Thompson Blackwood Automotive would open its doors to the community. But tonight, two people who had found each other in the depths of their respective struggles stood together in the space they'd created, ready to prove that business could be about more than profit, that success could be measured in lives improved. Rather than just money earned, the transformation was complete. Now the real work could begin. 6 months after Thompson Blackwood Automotive opened its doors, the old gas station had become the heartbeat of the neighborhood. What started as an ambitious dream had evolved into something neither Marcus nor Diana had fully anticipated. Thriving business that had genuinely transformed the community around it, Marcus arrived at work each morning to find a line of customers waiting. Not because they had emergencies, but because they preferred to bring their business to a shop they trusted. The waiting area that Diana had insisted on designing was always full, with neighbors chatting over coffee while their cars were serviced. Children did homework at the small tables while their parents waited, and elderly residents had started, treating the shop as an informal community center. The success was measurable in ways that went beyond profit margins. Mrs. Rodriguez, the woman who lived across the street, had started bringing homemade tamales for the staff every Friday. The local high school had approached them about starting an automotive program, with students earning credits while learning real skills. 3 of their customers had been so impressed with the training opportunities that they'd quit other jobs to join the apprenticeship program Marcus had developed. I never expected this, Marcus told Diana one afternoon as they watched Carlos train a new apprentice in the art of brake repair. I thought we'd fix cars and maybe sponsor a Little League team. I didn't realize we were going to become the center of people's lives. Diana smiled, wiping grease from her hands after helping diagnose a transmission problem. She'd insisted on learning every aspect of the business, much to the initial surprise of customers who weren't used to seeing women in expensive clothes working under the hood of cars. This is what happens when you build something with purpose instead of just profit, she said. People can feel the difference. The numbers supported her optimism. They were booked solid 3 weeks in advance, with customer satisfaction ratings that exceeded anything Diana had achieved in her previous business ventures. More importantly, they were profitable enough to expand their community programs and increase wages for all employees, but success had brought unexpected challenges. A corporate chain had opened a new location just 2 miles away, specifically targeting their customer base with aggressive pricing and flashy advertising. Several competitors had tried to poach their trained mechanics with higher salary offers. Local politicians had started pressuring them to expand faster. Seeing economic development opportunities that didn't necessarily align with their community-focused mission. "We're getting attention we didn't ask for," Diana observed during their weekly planning meeting. "Channel 12 wants to do a feature story about our apprenticeship program. The mayor's office is calling about participating in a small business showcase. 3 different investors have reached out about franchising opportunities." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the spotlight. "We're not ready for that kind of attention. We're still figuring out how to do this right in one location." "I agree, but we can't ignore it completely. The positive attention could help us advocate for policy changes that benefit small businesses like ours." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the office door. Tommy Martinez, one of their first apprentices, stepped in with an expression that mixed excitement with nervousness. "Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know I got the job at Southwest Airlines. They're hiring me as a junior mechanic. Based on the training I received here." Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. "That's fantastic, Tommy. You've earned it. When do you start?" "Next month. I know it leaves you short-handed, but the pay is almost double what I'm making here, and the benefits are incredible." Diana spoke up. "Tommy, this is exactly what we hoped would happen. You came here to learn skills that would create opportunities for you. The fact that you're ready to move on to something better means we're doing our job right." After Tommy left, Marcus and Diana sat in contemplative silence. They'd known that training people for better opportunities might mean losing good employees, but experiencing it for the first time was more difficult than anticipated. "We need to think about this differently," Diana said finally. "Instead of seeing trained employees leaving as a loss, we should see it as proof that our model works. Tommy's success story will attract more people to our program, and we need to build better relationships with employers who value our training," Marcus added. "Maybe create formal partnerships with companies that want to hire people we've trained." Their planning was interrupted again, this time by an unexpected visitor. A woman in an expensive suit stepped into the office, introducing herself as Sarah Chen, a reporter from the Phoenix Business Journal. "I'm writing a story about innovative small businesses that are making a difference in their communities," she explained. "Your shop keeps coming up in conversations with economic development officials and community leaders." Diana and Marcus exchanged glances. It agreed to be selective about media attention, focusing on their work rather than publicity. "We appreciate the interest," Diana said diplomatically, "but we're not really looking for media coverage, right?" "Now," Sarah Chen smiled. "I understand the hesitation, but I think you're missing an opportunity. Your model of combining profitable business with community development is exactly what people need to see right now. You could inspire other entrepreneurs to think beyond just making money." Marcus found himself intrigued despite his reservations. "What kind of story are you planning to write?" "I want to focus on the practical aspects of what you've built. How you identified a community need, structured a business to address it, and measured success in terms of community impact as well as financial returns. I think other business owners could learn from your approach." After Sarah left, promising to send them her previous articles for review, Marcus and Diana found themselves in deep discussion about their growing influence and responsibility. "Maybe she's right," Diana said. "If we can help other people build businesses that serve their communities, isn't that worth the exposure?" "As long as we don't lose focus on what we're actually doing here," Marcus replied. "I've seen what happens when businesses get too caught up in their own success stories." That evening, Marcus drove through the neighborhood surrounding their shop, something he'd started doing regularly to stay connected with the community they served. The changes were subtle but unmistakable. More small businesses were opening, attracted by the foot traffic their shop generated. Property values were rising, but not so dramatically as to displace long-time residents. Young families were moving in, drawn by the sense of community that had developed around local businesses like theirs. He stopped at Rosa's Market, a small grocery store that had become one of their regular customers. Rosa herself was behind the counter, as she always was in the evenings. "How's business, Marcus?" she asked with genuine warmth. "Good. Really good. How about you?" Rosa's smile was answer enough, but she elaborated anyway. "Best year I've had in a decade. All these new families moving in, plus the workers from your shop coming in for lunch. You and Diana have been good for all of us," as Marcus drove home. To his new apartment, a modest but comfortable place in the same neighborhood as the shop, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. He was no longer worried about paying bills or keeping food in his refrigerator. He had meaningful work that used his skills and served his community. He had a business partner who had become one of his closest friends and most trusted advisors, but perhaps most importantly, he had a sense of purpose that went beyond his own survival. The day brought opportunities to solve problems, teach skills, and make life a little better for the people around him. His phone rang as he pulled into his parking space. It was Diana calling from her own new home, a modest house she'd purchased just a few blocks from the shop. Dad, I've been thinking about the reporter's visit," she said without preamble. "I think we should do the interview." "What changed your mind?" "I got a call tonight from a woman in Tucson. Somehow she heard about what we're doing and she wants advice on starting something similar in her neighborhood. If we can help other people replicate what we've built, imagine the impact we could have." Marcus considered this. What would that look like? Consulting? Franchising? Neither, exactly. More like mentoring. Helping people understand the principles behind what we've done, and supporting them as they adapt those principles to their own communities and circumstances. The idea excited Marcus more than he'd expected. We'd need to be careful not to let it distract from what we're building here. Absolutely. But Marcus, what if we could help create 100 shops like ours? What if we could prove that businesses can be profitable and community-focused at the same time? After they hung up, Marcus sat in his car for a few more minutes, looking up at his apartment building. A year ago, he'd been living in a studio with a leaking ceiling, wondering how he was going to survive another month. Now he was contemplating how to help other people build the kind of business he and you, Diana, had created together. The next morning brought another surprise. Carlos approached Marcus with a proposal that demonstrated how much their shop culture had influenced everyone who worked there. "I've been thinking about Tommy leaving," Carlos said. "Instead of just replacing him, what if we created a more formal program for placing our trained people in good jobs? Maybe develop relationships with employers who value the kind of training we provide?" Marcus smiled. "Diana and I were just discussing something similar. What did you have in mind?" "Well, I still have contacts throughout the industry from my 30 years in business. I could reach out to shop managers, fleet supervisors, even dealership service directors. Let them know about the quality of people we're training." "It could work," Marcus said, "especially if we can create a reputation for producing employees who are not just skilled, but also honest and customer-focused." "Exactly. And maybe we could offer continuing education for people who've moved on to other jobs. Keep them connected to what we're building here," as they discussed the details. Marcus realized that their business was evolving beyond what either he or Diana had originally envisioned. They weren't just running an auto repair shop. They were creating a model for how business could serve community development, how profit and purpose could coexist, how success could be measured in terms of improved lives rather than just money earned. That afternoon, Diana returned from a meeting with the mayor's office with news that would test their commitment to their principles. "They want us to open 3 more locations within the next 18 months, she announced. "They're willing to provide tax incentives, expedited permitting, even help with site selection." Marcus felt a familiar uneasiness. "That's moving pretty fast." "I told them we'd consider it, but that we wouldn't compromise our standards or community focus for the sake of rapid expansion." Diana leaned back in her chair, studying the ceiling as she often did when wrestling with complex decisions. "I think we should stick to our original plan. Prove that our model works consistently before we try to scale it. Build relationships with the communities where we want to expand. Make sure we can maintain our values while growing. So you think we should turn down the mayor's offer? I think we should tell them we're flattered, but we're committed to sustainable growth that serves communities rather than just economic development statistics. Marcus felt relief wash over him. I was hoping you'd say that. Why having second thoughts about expansion? Not about expansion, but about doing it for the wrong reasons. I keep thinking about what my father would say about all this attention and these opportunities. What do you think he would say? Marcus smiled. He'd probably tell me to remember why we started this in the first place, and to make sure that every decision we make honors that purpose. As evening approached and they prepared to close the shop for the day, Marcus and Diana stood together in the main service bay, watching their employees finish up their work. Carlos was teaching a new apprentice how to properly torque wheel bolts. Two regular customers were chatting with each other in the waiting area, having struck up a friendship over multiple visits. A teenager was doing homework at one of the tables, waiting for his mother to finish her shift as one of their administrative assistants. This is what success looks like, Diana said quietly. Not the media attention or the expansion opportunities, but this. People working together, learning together, building relationships that make everyone's life a little better. Marcus nodded. My father would be proud. He should be. We all should be. As they locked up and headed to their respective homes, both Marcus and Diana carried with them the satisfaction of having built something meaningful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new decisions about how to grow, while staying true to their values. But tonight, they could rest in the knowledge that they had proven something important, that business could be a force for community development, that profit and purpose were not mutually exclusive, and that two people from very different backgrounds could create something together that neither could have achieved alone. The transformation was complete, but the impact was just beginning. 2 years had passed since Marcus Thompson first encountered Diana Blackwood crying on a park bench, and the ripple effects of that moment of kindness had spread far beyond anything either of them could have imagined. Thompson Blackwood Automotive had become more than a successful business. It had become a model that communities across the country were trying to replicate. The morning started like any other, with Marcus arriving at the shop before sunrise to review the day's schedule and ensure everything was ready for their team. But today was different. Today marked the second anniversary of their opening, and they had planned a community celebration that would showcase everything they had built together. As Marcus unlocked the doors, he was surprised to find Diana already. They're sitting in the customer lounge with a steaming cup of coffee and a thick folder of documents. You're here early, Marcus observed, pouring himself coffee from the machine they'd installed for customers and staff alike. Couldn't sleep, Diana admitted. I kept thinking about everything that's happened, everything we've accomplished, and everything we still want to do. Marcus settled into the chair across from her, noting the contemplative expression on her face. Having second thoughts about the celebration today? Not second thoughts exactly, more like ... perspective thoughts. Do you remember what you said to me that first day in the park? About pain being pain, regardless of the specific circumstances? Marcus nodded. I remember why. Diana opened the folder and spread out several letters and emails. These are from people who've heard about what we're doing. Business owners, community leaders, people who are trying to create change in their own neighborhoods. Reading their stories, I keep coming back to that moment when you chose to stop and listen to a stranger. Marcus picked up one of the letters, scanning its contents. A woman in Detroit was writing about her attempts to revitalize her neighborhood through small business development. A man in rural Montana was asking for advice on starting a community-focused auto repair training program. A group of veterans in Texas wanted guidance on creating a business model that would serve both economic and social purposes. They're all looking for the same thing we were looking for, Marcus realized. Purpose, connection, a way to build something that matters. Exactly. They're all struggling with the same challenges we faced. Limited resources, established competitors, skepticism from people who think business is only about maximizing profit. Diana pulled out another document, this one bearing the logo of a major business school. I got a call yesterday from Stanford. They want us to speak at their entrepreneurship conference about building sustainable, community-focused businesses. Marcus looked up from the letters, surprised. What did you tell them? I told them I'd discuss it with my partner, Deanna said with a smile. But Marcus, I think we should consider it, not for the recognition, but for the opportunity to share what we've learned with people who might go on to build similar businesses in their own communities. Before Marcus could respond, the shop's front door opened and Carlos entered, followed by 3 of their current apprentices and 2 former employees who had moved on. 2 other opportunities, but still maintained connections with the shop. Sorry to interrupt, Carlos said, but Tommy's here with some friends who wanted to see the place before the celebration tonight. Tommy Martinez entered with 2 other young mechanics, both wearing Southwest Airlines uniforms. Been telling you about, Tommy explained to Marcus and Diana. They're thinking about starting their own shop in Flagstaff, and they wanted to see how you've structured everything here. What followed was an impromptu tour and discussion that lasted nearly 2 hours. Marcus and Diana found themselves explaining not just the business model, but the philosophy behind their approach to customer service, employee development, and community engagement. The key is remembering that you're not just running a business, Diana told the visiting mechanics. You're creating something that serves people's lives in ways that go beyond the immediate transaction. But how do you balance that with making enough money to keep the doors open? One of the visitors asked. Marcus fielded this question, drawing on 2 years of experience that had taught him the practical realities of principled business ownership. You have to be excellent at the fundamentals: fair pricing, quality work, efficient operations. But you also have to understand that customer loyalty and employee satisfaction are assets that pay dividends over time. People will pay a little more and drive a little farther for service they trust, Carlos added. But you have to earn that trust every single day. As the morning progressed, the shop filled with employees, customers, and community members who had come to help set up for the evening celebration. Watching the easy interaction between all these different groups, Marcus was struck by how naturally the shop had become a gathering place where relationships formed across traditional social and economic boundaries. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with her usual Friday tamales, but today she'd brought twice as many to share with the celebration volunteers. The teenagers from the high school automotive program came to help set up tables and chairs, chatting easily with older community members who remembered when the building had been a gas station. Rosa, from the market across the street, brought flowers from her shop to decorate the space, refusing payment and insisting it was her contribution to the celebration. You've been good for all of us, she told Diana. This whole neighborhood is different because of what you built here. As afternoon approached, Marcus and Diana found themselves standing in the office, looking out at the bustling activity in the shop and the parking lot beyond. Do you miss it? Marcus asked suddenly. Miss what? Your old life. The corporate world, the big deals, the power and prestige that came with running a major company? Diana considered the question seriously. Sometimes I miss the intellectual challenge of complex negotiations and strategic planning. But I don't miss the isolation, the constant pressure to prioritize profit over people, or the feeling that success was measured only by numbers on a balance sheet. She gestured toward the window, where they could see Carlos teaching a group of high school students how to properly check tire pressure. This feels more real to me, more connected to actual human needs and relationships, even when it's messier and more complicated than just maximizing quarterly earnings. Especially then, Diana said with conviction. Real life is messy and complicated. Businesses that pretend otherwise are missing opportunities to create genuine value. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah Chen, the business journalist, but eventually convinced them to participate in her story about innovative small businesses. The article had been published 3 months earlier and had generated more attention than either Marcus or Diana had expected. I hope you don't mind me crashing your celebration, Sarah said, but I wanted to follow up on the response to the article. You've become something of a case study in business schools. I've had inquiries from entrepreneurs in 15 different states. Diana and Marcus exchanged glances. They'd been aware of increased interest in their model, but the scope was larger than they'd realized. What kind of inquiries? Marcus asked. people wanting to visit and learn from what you've built, investors looking for similar opportunities to fund, policymakers interested in how to support community-focused businesses. You've started something bigger than just one auto repair shop. As the celebration began that evening, the parking lot and shop floor filled with hundreds of people from throughout the neighborhood and beyond. Local politicians, business owners, customers, employees, and community members mingled in a way that felt organic and genuine rather than forced or artificial. Marcus found himself in conversation with a city council member who was asking detailed questions about their apprenticeship program and its impact on local employment. Diana was explaining their customer service philosophy to a group of small business owners who were considering similar approaches in their own enterprises, but the moment that defined the evening came when Mrs. Rodriguez asked for everyone's attention and made an impromptu speech. 2 years ago, this corner was empty, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. We had to drive across town to get our cars fixed, and we never knew if we were being treated fairly. Our young people had to leave the neighborhood to find opportunities to learn valuable skills. She gestured toward Marcus and Diana, who were standing together near the main service bay. These two didn't just open a business. They invested in our community. They created jobs. They trained our kids. They became our neighbors. They showed us that business can be about building each other up instead of just taking what you can get. The applause that followed was warm and sustained, but Marcus felt overwhelmed by the recognition. He'd never set out to be a community leader or social entrepreneur. He'd simply tried to honor his father's values while building a life that had meaning and purpose. Diana spoke next, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. When Marcus and I first met, we were both at low points in our lives. We'd lost things that mattered to us, and we were struggling to figure out how to move forward. What we discovered together is that the path forward isn't something you walk alone. She looked directly at Marcus as she continued. Every good thing that has happened here started with one person choosing to care about another person's problems. Marcus stopped to help a stranger, and that act of kindness created a partnership that has changed hundreds of lives. As the formal part of the celebration concluded and people began to mingle more freely, Marcus found himself in conversation with Tommy Martinez and his friends from Southwest Airlines. "We've decided to do it," Tommy announced. "We're going to start our own shop in Flagstaff, using your model as a guide." "That's fantastic," Marcus said. "What made you decide?" "Watching what you've built here, seeing how it's changed people's lives, including mine. I want to create the same kind of opportunities for other people that you created for me." One of Tommy's friends added, "We've already found a location and started talking to potential investors. But we want to do it right, the way you did it. Focused on community service rather than just profit maximization." Later that night, after the last guest had departed and the cleanup was complete, Marcus and Diana sat together in the customer lounge, sharing a bottle of champagne that someone had brought as a celebration gift. "So what do you think? Are you ready to become business consultants and inspirational speakers?" Marcus laughed. "I never imagined my life would include opportunities like that. But if we can help other people build businesses that serve their communities, maybe we should consider it." "I've been thinking about creating a non-profit foundation," Diana said. "Something that could provide training, resources, and maybe small grants to people who want to start community-focused businesses." "That sounds like something your father would be proud of," Marcus observed. "And something your father would understand," Diana replied. Using business skills to help people build better lives for themselves and their families, they sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, reflecting on the evening and the remarkable journey that had brought them to this point. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said eventually. "Anything? Do you think we would have become friends under different circumstances? If we'd met at a business conference or a social event, would we have connected the way we did?" Diana considered the question carefully. "I don't think so. Not because we're not compatible as people, but because we needed to see each other at our most vulnerable to recognize what we had in common." "Which was what?" "The desire to build something meaningful, the belief that business can be a force for good, the understanding that real success is measured by the positive impact you have on other people's lives." Marcus nodded. My father used to say that you never know when you're going to meet someone who changes your life. Said the key is to be the kind of person who's ready for those moments when they come. Were you ready? Diana asked. I thought I was just trying to help someone who was having a bad day. I had no idea I was meeting my future business partner and one of my closest friends. Diana smiled. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the best things in life happen when we're focused on helping others rather than helping ourselves. They prepared to lock up and head home. Marcus took one last look around the shop that had become the center of his professional and personal life. In 24 months, this space had transformed from an abandoned gas station to a thriving business that employed 15 people, served hundreds of customers, and had become a model for community-focused entrepreneurship. But more than that, it had become proof that one moment of kindness could create ripple effects that changed countless lives in ways that were impossible to predict or measure. Ready to go home? Diana asked. Ready, Marcus replied. But first, thank you. For what? For trusting me with this opportunity. For believing that someone like me could be your partner in building something this important. Diana shook her head. Marcus, you still don't understand. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You saved my life that day in the park. Not with grand gestures or expensive solutions, but with simple human kindness. Everything we've built since then started with that choice you made to care about a stranger. As they walked out together into the warm Phoenix night, both Marcus and Diana carried with them the satisfaction of having proven something important about the power of compassion, the possibility of principled business, and the impact that two people can have when they choose to build something together that serves purposes larger than themselves. The story that began with a crying woman and a kind stranger had become a testament to the truth that real wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions, but in the positive difference you make in other people's lives. And in a world that often feels divided by differences in background, resources, and opportunities, their partnership stood as proof that connection and common purpose can bridge any gap when people choose kindness over indifference, service over selfishness, shared dreams over individual ambition. Sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the simplest acts of human decency. Sometimes changing the world starts with stopping to help one person who needs it. Sometimes the most successful partnerships are built not on contracts and negotiations, but on mutual respect, shared values, and the radical belief that business can be a force for good in the world. Marcus and Diana had learned all of this by living it. Now it was their turn to help others discover the same truths for themselves. 5 years had passed since that life-changing encounter in the park, and Marcus Thompson stood before an audience of 300 entrepreneurs at the National Small Business Summit in Denver. Beside him, Diana Blackwood held the award they'd just received for Community Impact Business of the Year, the journey from a desperate mechanic and a heartbroken billionaire to recognized leaders and community-focused. Entrepreneurship still felt surreal. When people ask us for the secret to our success, Marcus began, his voice steady, despite speaking to the largest audience of his life. They expect us to talk about business plans, market analysis, or funding strategies. But the real answer is much simpler. We chose to see each other as human beings first. The audience listened intently as Diana stepped forward. 5 years ago, I lost everything I thought mattered. My company, my reputation, my sense of self-worth. I was sitting alone in a park, crying like my world had ended, because in many ways it had. A stranger could have walked by and ignored me like dozens of others did that morning. Instead, Marcus chose compassion. Marcus nodded, remembering that pivotal moment. I wasn't trying to change anyone's life. I just saw someone in pain and wondered if I could help. That single decision to stop and listen created a partnership that has transformed our community and inspired businesses across the country. The Thompson Blackwood Foundation had funded 17 community-focused auto repair shops in 12 states. Their apprenticeship model had been adopted by vocational schools nationwide. 3 documentary films had featured their story. Yet Marcus knew the most important impact couldn't be measured in statistics or media coverage. The question isn't whether you have resources or connections or perfect circumstances, Diana continued. The question is whether you're willing to see opportunities to serve others, even when you're struggling yourself, especially when you're struggling yourself. After their presentation, Marcus and Diana were approached by countless audience members sharing their own stories of challenge and hope. A single mother from Oakland wanted to start a community childcare center. A veteran from rural Georgia dreamed of creating a farm-table restaurant that would train young people in culinary skills. A teacher from inner-city Milwaukee had plans for an after-school program that would teach financial literacy through student-run businesses. Every person we talked to today has the potential to create the same kind of transformation we stumbled into, Diana observed as they sat in the airport, waiting for their flight back to Phoenix. They just need to believe it's possible. Marcus checked his phone, scrolling through messages from the team back home. Carlos had sent photos of their newest apprentice, a teenager who'd been homeless 6 months earlier and was now learning skills that would provide a stable career. Rosa from the market had shared news that her son had been accepted to college, partly because of the tutoring program they'd started in their shop's waiting area. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd walked past you that day, Marcus said quietly. If I'd been too focused on my own problems to notice yours, but you didn't, Diana replied. And that's the point. You made a choice that seemed small at the time, but created ripples that are still spreading. Their flight was called, and as they boarded the plane, Marcus reflected on how different this travel experience was from his desperate journey with baby Lily in the original story that had inspired their path. Instead of crisis and uncertainty, he felt purpose and possibility. During the flight, Diana pulled out her tablet and showed Marcus the latest proposals for expanding their foundation's reach. We've got applications from entrepreneurs in 6 countries now. People who heard about our model and want to adapt it to their own cultural contexts. That's incredible, Marcus said, studying the applications. A motorcycle repair cooperative in Uganda, a women's automotive training center in Guatemala, a mobile repair service for rural communities in Australia. The principles are universal, Diana noted. Treat people with dignity. Provide valuable services at fair prices. Invest in your community's development. Measure success by improved lives, rather than just profits maximized. As their plane descended into Phoenix, the city lights spread out below them like a constellation of possibilities. Somewhere in that sprawl was their original shop, still serving the neighborhood that had embraced them from the beginning. But now it was part of something larger, a movement that proved business could be a force for healing and hope. What I'm most proud of? Marcus asked as they collected their luggage. What's that? Tommy opened his 4th location last month. Carlos is teaching at the community college now. Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter just graduated from our apprenticeship program. The ripples keep spreading, creating opportunities we never imagined. Diana smiled. Your father would be amazed by what grew from the values he taught you. He always said kindness was free, but priceless. I never understood what he meant, until we built something that proves it. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the original shop to find a line of customers waiting, just as he had every day for 5 years. But today felt different. Today he carried the weight and privilege of knowing their story had become larger than themselves, that their choices had inspired others to choose service over selfishness, community over pure profit. Morning, boss, called out Sandra. Their newest apprentice, who was already under the hood of a customer's car despite arriving just 15 minutes earlier. Morning, Sandra. How's the transmission diagnosis coming? Good news and bad news, she replied with the confidence of someone who'd learned her skills from the best teachers. Good news is, it's repairable. Bad news is, it'll take 2 days. But I already talked to Mrs. Patterson about our loaner car program. Marcus felt the familiar surge of pride watching his employees embody the values that had guided their business from the beginning. Every interaction, every diagnosis, every repair was an opportunity to demonstrate that businesses could serve people's needs with integrity and compassion. Diana arrived an hour later with coffee and pastries for the team, a tradition she'd maintained since their earliest days. Conference calls with potential foundation partners this morning, she announced. But first, I want to hear about yesterday's community meeting. Carlos updated them on the neighborhood revitalization project they'd been supporting. Property values had risen, but affordable housing initiatives had ensured longtime residents weren't displaced. New businesses were opening, attracted by the stability and community focus that had made their area a model for sustainable development. "It's exactly what we hoped would happen," Carlos said. "Growth that strengthens the community instead of destroying it." As the day progressed, Marcus found himself thinking about the countless small moments that had built their success. First customer who'd trusted them with her family's only vehicle, the teenager who'd overcome his skepticism about adults to embrace their mentorship, the elderly man who'd become a regular visitor, not because his car needed frequent repairs, but because he enjoyed the conversations and sense of community he found in their waiting area. Late that afternoon, a young woman entered the shop, carrying a crying baby, looking overwhelmed and desperate. She approached the counter hesitantly, explaining that her car had broken down in the parking lot and she didn't know what to do. Marcus watched as Sandra immediately offered to look at the car, while Diana invited the woman to sit in the comfortable waiting area and brought her a bottle of water. Without discussion or direction, his team was embodying the same instinct for compassion that had started everything. "No charge for the diagnosis," Sandra reported after 15 minutes. "Loose battery cable, took 30 seconds to fix." The woman's relief was evident as she thanked them repeatedly, offering to pay despite being told the service was free. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "I was completely panicked." "Just remember to help someone else when you get the chance," Diana replied gently. "That's how kindness keeps spreading." After the woman left, Marcus and Diana stood together, watching the normal rhythm of their business continue around them. Customers chatting with employees, apprentices learning from experienced mechanics, community members stopping by for conversations that had nothing to do with auto repair. "Do you think she understood?" Diana asked. "Understood what?" "What just happened to her is the same thing that happened to us 5 years ago. Someone chose to help, even though they didn't have to." Marcus nodded. "Maybe not consciously, but she'll remember how it felt to be treated with kindness when she was vulnerable. And someday, when she sees someone else in need, she might make the same choice we made." As evening approached and they prepared to close the shop, Marcus realized that the most important part of their story wasn't the business success or the recognition or even the community impact. It was the proof that ordinary people could create extraordinary change simply by choosing to care about each other. "What's next for us?" Diana asked as they locked up for the night. Marcus looked around at the neighborhood that had become their home, the business that had become their legacy, and the partnership that had become one of the most important relationships of his life. "More of the same," he said simply. "More opportunities to serve, more chances to teach, more moments to choose kindness over indifference. That's it? And no grand plans for expansion or new ventures?" Marcus smiled. "Diana, we're living proof that the smallest actions can have the biggest impact. Every day we get to help people solve problems, learn skills, and build better lives. Every day we get to show that business can be about more than profit. What could be grander than that?" As they walked to their cars, the evening sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples above the Phoenix skyline. Both Marcus and Diana carried with them the deep satisfaction of lives lived with purpose. They had discovered that wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in differences made. That success wasn't about what you achieved for yourself, but what you created for others. Their story had begun with one person's choice to help a stranger in pain. It had grown into a partnership that transformed a community, inspired a movement, and proved that the most powerful force in business and in life was simple human kindness. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities to serve, new chances, to teach, new moments to choose compassion over indifference. And somewhere, someone would face a choice between walking past a stranger's pain or stopping to help. The story continues with every choice we make to see each other as human beings deserving of dignity, respect, and care. The transformation never ends when it's built on the foundation of one person deciding that another person's well-being matters, That's the real secret. That's the lasting wealth. That's the legacy that changes the world, one act of kindness at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.